Is God a father? Or is she mother? The first instance that a male pronoun was used to describe God isn't found all the way until the book of Psalms, which means 19 books into the Old Testament, and God has yet to be considered a male. That first instance says, God is father to the fatherless, defender of widows. This is God. This verse is less about defining God as male and more about defining God as the one who stands on the side of the orphan and the widow. How does God stand for the orphan and widow? Well, we can read, God said, change your ways and your actions and deal with each other justly. Do not oppress the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow. God protects the fatherless and the widow by instructing his people to take care of them. Another example, God instructed Israel, at the end of every third year, bring the entire tithe of that year's harvest and give it to the foreigners living among you, the orphans and the widows in your town, so that they can eat and be satisfied. Then I will bless you. God constantly defends and protects the needy and the poor. Are there any verses that describe God as mother? Yes, there are, but the English translations of these verses make it very difficult to understand. For example, he will cover you with his feathers. He will shelter you with his wings. If you notice, the English translation refers to God as he, which is an inaccurate translation. The original Hebrew does not use male or female pronouns for God. So an accurate translation would say, Yahweh will cover you with feathers, shelter you with wings. If you pay attention to the image being portrayed here, you'll notice that it's the image of a bird covering its young with its wings. Male birds don't do that. Therefore, it can only be a mother bird. God as mother. Next example, we find this one all the way back in Deuteronomy. Like an eagle that rouses her chicks and hovers over her young, so God spreads God's wings to take them up and carry them to safety. God as mother. Again. Next, God will say, I have long been silent. Yes, I have restrained myself. But now, like a woman in labor, I will cry. God as soon-to-be mother. Next, Jerusalem says, God has forgotten about us. God says, never. Can a mother forget her nursing child? Can she feel no love for the child that she has borne? God as mother. Next, God said, I will comfort you in Jerusalem as a mother comforts her child. God as mother. Let's keep going. Like a bear whose cubs have been taken away, I will tear out your heart. Now, is this talking about a male or a female bear with its cubs? No doubt it's describing a mother bear with her cubs. God as mother. I will devour you like a hungry lioness. God as female. Next, how often have I wanted to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings. God as mother. You see, there is no lack of motherly descriptions for God in the Bible. It should not be taboo to refer to God as mother. The Bible does it all the time. God does it to God's self all the time. Let's turn to Genesis. In the creation story, Adam is known as the masculine figure and Eve as the feminine. However, the Hebrew word for humanity or human being is the word Adam. Adam is not a name. We can see this in Genesis 1 verse 27. God created Adam in God's own image. In the image of God, God created them. plural. Male and female, God created both in God's image. You see, women are also part of God's image, if you didn't already think that. Now, in the original Hebrew, the word for life or life giver is the word kavah, which is translated in most Bibles as the word or the name Eve, which is also an inaccurate and misleading translation. For example, Adam named his wife Eve because she would give life to all who live. That statement makes no sense because Eve doesn't mean anything in English. An accurate translation would be, the man named his woman life giver because she would give life to all who live. You see, that does make sense. Now, this is a huge deal because guess who else is a life giver? There is no other God but me. I am the one who takes and gives life. The Spirit of God has made me, and the breath of the Almighty gives me life. Each day I pray to God who gives me life. God gives life to everyone who walks on the earth. And most importantly, God formed a human from the dust of the ground. God breathed the breath of life into its nostrils, and then it became a living person. God, no doubtedly, is a life giver. And in that way, God is like Eve. God is mother. Also, in Genesis, God said, "It is not good for the human to be alone. I will make a helper who is right for him." The word helper that is used in this verse is the Hebrew word ezer, which means the one who aids. God gave the human a partner because it was incapable of taking care of the earth on its own. It is important to understand that the word ezer does not infer the status of an assistant, a worker, or a slave. And we can know this because if we read Exodus 18 verse 4, it says, Moses named his second son Eliezer, which is two words, Eli, meaning my God, and Ezer, as we just learned, means helper or the one who aids. Moses named his son that because Moses said, "The God of my ancestors was my helper. God rescued me from the sword of Pharaoh." Moses uses the word Ezer when calling God his helper in the same way that God uses the word Ezer when calling Eve Adam's helper. Do you think Moses sees God as his personal assistant or his slave? Do you think Moses is in charge of God and God has to do everything Moses commands him to do? I highly doubt that. Moses calls God his helper because God rescued him from Pharaoh. God helped Moses with something that he could not do on his own. Another example, God of my salvation, do not turn your back on me. Do not reject your servant. You have always been my helper. Don't leave me now. Don't abandon me. This psalmist admits to being God's servant, yet he calls God his helper. Now, who is lesser, the master or the servant? The verse labels God as master and helper. Though the master is helping the servant, that does not make the master the servant's slave. The master does not lose the status of master just because it is helping somebody else. The prophet Amos said, "Do what is good and run from evil so that you may live. Then God will be your helper." A helper should not be understood as an assistant, a worker, or a slave. For example, who are modern day helpers? Well, a firefighter is the helper for someone who is trapped in a fire because they have the skills and equipment needed to rescue those who cannot save themselves. A medic is a helper for someone who is ill or hurt because they have the skills and equipment needed to help and rescue those who cannot save themselves. Do you see the picture here? Biblical helpers should be highly respected and honored because they save those who cannot help themselves. God did not give Adam a servant in which to rule over. God gave Adam someone to rule alongside him and take care of the earth. Adam and Eve are equal. Women are made in the image of God, and they should be treated and respected as such. In the same way that Eve is Adam's helper, God is our helper. And in that same way, God is feminine. The masculine is associated with power, force, violence, aggression. But the feminine is associated with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. These are all attributes of God's Spirit. Therefore, God's Spirit is feminine. Therefore, God Himself, or herself, is feminine. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on Him, which is the Spirit of wisdom and understanding. So, the Spirit of God is known as the Spirit of wisdom. They are one and the same. Another proverb says, "Wisdom is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Happy are those who hold her tightly." Wisdom is feminine. So if God's Spirit is wisdom and wisdom is feminine, then God's Spirit is feminine. Another example, don't turn your back on wisdom, for she will protect you. Love her, and she will guard you. If you prize wisdom, she will make you great. Embrace her, and she will honor you. So just to be clear, the Spirit of God is wisdom, and wisdom is unmistakably feminine. So, there you have it. God the Father is equally God the Mother. God has both masculine and feminine attributes because God created both in His image. However, that does not mean God is a human male or a human female. There is a difference. Gender has nothing to do with human sexuality. The only defining factors for a human sex are human reproductive organs. Now, since God is not a human being, God doesn't have a penis or a vagina. God has no need for them. God is not a man. God is not a human. God existed before God created humans. How can God be human if God created them, male and female? Now we can read in Job 33:12, God is greater than any human being, meaning God is not a human being, meaning God is not male or female, but at the same time, God is both masculine and feminine. All right. Human male and human female is not the same as masculinity and femininity. That's hard to say. Those are two different things. So, as to which pronoun should you use when speaking of God is completely up to you. You can call God he, she, it, or simply God. If you wish to continue to refer to God as Father, that's absolutely okay. However, just be sure not to criticize those who refer to God as Mother, because she is Mother, the giver of life.